The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are 3-3 on the year after entering their Week 5 bye with a 3-1 record. They've now dropped back-to-back games to the Detroit Lions and to the division rival Falcons, and in these losses they put up a combined 19 points, and especially with the Atlanta game, they very easily could have won, and now the Buccaneers are in a very interesting situation. Do they make a trade to push for a division title, or do they pack it in and become sellers at the upcoming trade deadline? Well, we're going to examine both sides of this and discuss what's right and what's wrong with this team. There is a route I believe they should go, and I think there is a pretty clear route for them to maximize long-term success, but that is, of course, easier said than done. But the thing to remember with the Bucs is they're 3-3 through 6 games, and they could be 4-2 as easily as they could be 1-5, and they're allowing the 6th fewest points per game out of any team across the NFL and have allowed more than 20 points just once. But what should they do moving forward? Well, we're going to dive into that in today's video. Now let's begin. And we are starting today's video by taking a look at all 3 of Tampa's wins. They were wins over the Vikings, Bears, and Saints, and they're the only 3 games in the year in which they've put up 20 or more points. And when they play 2 of the elite teams in the NFC in Philadelphia and Detroit, they didn't lose a heartbreaker with a score of 23-20 on a last-minute heroic play by A.J. Brown or Amon-Ra St. Brown or anything like that. They lost by double digits in each game, and in each game there was a common theme. The Bucs could not hang with them, and it was clear, and the Philly game in particular was bad as they amassed just 174 yards of total offense and had just 12 first downs in the entire game. And I think it's pretty clear with the 2023 Buccaneers that yes, they can get to 8 or 9 wins with Baker Mayfield as their starting quarterback, and they can win the NFC South. But I've asked this question before with the Raiders when they beat teams like the Broncos, for example. Does it matter? Even if Tampa stumbles their way into a division title, which, by the way, they still very much can, as they should have beat the Falcons and should be 4-2 on the year, but if they play even a team like Dallas with everything on the line, are they going to win? I don't think so, and we saw that last year when they got beat by a score of 31-14 in the wild card round. And the title of today's video of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are in a very interesting situation applies to them in a big way because they have a lot of pieces. They have a lot of good football players on this team. And if general manager Jason Licht said to himself, hey, I like what we have here and we're only a player or 2 away from seriously competing and beating teams like the Eagles, Lions, or 49ers, we should go all in and push for what would be our 2nd Super Bowl title in 4 years. Or on the flip side of this, he could say, you know, we're not just a player or 2 away, and in fact, it's more like 5 or 6, and instead of having a franchise legend like Mike Evans play his remaining days here, as Evans is 30 years old now, let's trade him while he still has trade value, and while he still has some gas in the tank, and wish him well. It would be a win-win for both sides as we get future draft capital. Mike can still compete for a Super Bowl depending on where he would be traded, maybe a place like Baltimore or Buffalo for example, and we can focus on the next chapter of Buccaneer football. And the offseason after Mike retires, we can reach out to his camp and figure out a day to induct him into the Bucs Ring of Honor and celebrate everything he did for our franchise while he was here. And the Baltimore or Buffalo part was not focusing on the finances at all and simply moving a player to a team in the AFC that thinks they are a receiver away from a Super Bowl. And to bring this back to the Bucs, it just depends on how they feel internally. Because they probably think the glass is half full, and if they acquire a few players this offseason, specifically along the offensive line, well, hey, we have both Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and we'll probably spend a 2nd or 3rd round pick on a running back, and we can be competing again in no time. But there is one problem I have with the Bucs, and one thing I think has to change if they are to compete with this core group of guys, and it's Todd Bowles. Specifically Todd Bowles as an in-game head coach. I love Todd as a defensive coordinator, and I think this is a classic case of a guy who is cut out to be a defensive coordinator and not a head coach. And there is nothing wrong with that. Dick LeBeau was a Hall of Fame defensive coordinator for the Bengals and Steelers and even won 2 Super Bowls as a defensive coordinator, but was just 12-33 as a head coach. Granted, there's several factors into this for LeBeau, but the point is, lifetime, Todd Bowles is 37-53 as a head coach. Yes, there's some things wrong with this roster, but there's decisions in every game where I'm watching the Bucs play and I'm thinking, please go for the kill or go for the offensive score, and they often play it safe. And in Week 7 against Atlanta, it wasn't any different. They forced a red zone turnover against the Falcons on a strip sack, which is already a huge play in itself, and they took the ball back to the 23-yard line with 17 seconds left in the first half. They had all 3 timeouts and opted to take a knee and go to halftime. I'm sorry, but why not take a single shot to a 6'5" future Hall of Famer in Mike Evans? And if he's triple teamed, hell, why not try an 18-yard dagger route across the middle to Chris Godwin to move the ball up to the 40 or 45-yard line with what would be 8 or 9 seconds and 2 timeouts left? You had all the momentum after this, and instead of trying to make it a 13-10 game, which, by the way, would have played a significant part down the stretch of this game, considering the Bucs only lost by 3, you take it in the half because you're satisfied with a red zone turnover. Godwin and Evans are an incredible duo, and with all the momentum after the big strip sack, with 3 timeouts, again, I don't understand not taking a single chance to push the momentum even more in your favor and, again, have a lead at half. And this type of conservative attitude or mindset frustrates the hell out of me, and I'm sure Bucs fans feel the same way. And even going back to Week 1 in a game they beat the Minnesota Vikings, the Bucs converted a 3rd and 10 with the Vikings having 0 timeouts and took 3 kneel downs to secure the win. Congratulations, a win in the NFL is a big deal. The completion to Chris Godwin was for 11 yards, but I fear what Todd Bowles would have done had they not converted the 3rd down. I wouldn't put it past Bowles to take a delay of game on the Vikings' 39-yard line and punt the ball from the 44-yard line, only to have a touchback and have the Vikings drive right down the field and tie the game. That also isn't to say the Bucs got lucky against the Vikings or anything like that, because they forced them into 3 turnovers and held them to 17 points in their stadium, which is a lot easier said than done. So I do credit the Bucs defense, which is Bowles' strength in a big way, for that victory. But one big problem Tampa has, and this isn't anything new by the way, but one big problem they have and what will severely hinder them down the stretch of the 2023 season, and we've already seen this through 6 games, is they can't run the ball. This is not hit or miss. They legitimately cannot run the football. They're averaging just 3.1 yards per carry, which ranks 31st in the NFL, and they're 29th in rushing yards on the year. And ranking 29th in rushing yards isn't anything to write home about, but what's concerning about this is they're 21st in rushing attempts, meaning Tampa legitimately tries to run the football but have 0 success. You would of course rather it be the other way around, where they are 29th in rushing attempts and 21st in yards, because they're efficient when they run the football, but that's not the case, not even close. And I know this is going to sound very simple, but you need a good ground game to help keep things flowing offensively speaking. And the way the Bucs have won in 2023 is a strategy that's not recommended, and certainly one that isn't sustainable. They play good defense, which by the way is sustainable, but they rely on the defense far too much to create turnovers and rely on those turnovers to get points on the board. Now, generally speaking, getting points off turnovers isn't a bad thing, nor am I trying to say it is. It's a great thing. But the Bucs have forced multiple turnovers in every game but one this year, which was against the Lions. And in a game where they forced 0 turnovers, what did they do? They lost by 14 points, and they only put up 6 points because their offense was abysmal. They also played a good run defense in Detroit, and the Lions made it simple for them. We're going to sell out to stop the run and force Baker Mayfield to beat us. And not surprisingly, that didn't go well for Tampa. And this was mentioned during the Week 7 recap, but outside of one 31-yard run by Baker against the Falcons, they had just 42 rushing yards on 19 carries, which equates to a paltry 2.2 yards per attempt. And I don't think Rachaad White would be an all-pro back on another team by any means, but Tampa's inability to run the football has been a problem for 2 years now. A 45-year-old Tom Brady led the league in passing attempts in 2022, largely because they gave up running the football. And this is another reason why the Bucs are in an interesting situation. They're not the Raiders, who have a legendary quarterback, or a quarterback on his way to being legendary in his division in his prime. No quarterback in this division, the NFC South that is, keeps opposing defensive coordinators up at night thinking, oh shit, how are we going to stop this guy? And if Tampa wanted to, they could trade away Mike Evans, they could trade away Shaq Barrett, they could trade away a lot of players and basically start over with a core of Tristan Wirfs, Antoine Winfield Jr., Kalijah Kancey, who I love by the way, and Vita Vea, and go from there. They would still have an above average defense, and the presumable rookie quarterback wouldn't have to put up 35 points per game just to compete, and if they put together a couple of wins, it could build this quarterback's confidence up fairly quickly. Having a first-round quarterback would insinuate the end of the Todd Bowles era, but I don't think he's ever going to win a Super Bowl as a head coach anyway, and that's due in some part to the in-game management decisions we discussed. The Bucs play in Buffalo in Week 8 and in Houston in Week 9 and even play in San Francisco in Week 11, so I don't think it's an exaggeration to say this team could lose 3 of their next 4 games. Normally, it would be a big problem, and I'm not going to act like that's ideal, but the Bucs can scrap together 9 wins with the games they have after this tough 4-game stretch. Sure, it's not going to be easy, but they can still legitimately win the NFC South. And the post-Tom Brady era was always going to be interesting because there were 2 routes they could go. They could do what they're doing and say we still have a lot of players from Super Bowl 55 and we still think we can win a Lombardi or at least get close to competing for one with the roster we have. Or we could start to sell and go for another rebuild. What's kind of forgotten about with the Buccaneers' history is they went from 2007 to 2020 without a playoff appearance. So I understand the hesitancy to start yet another rebuild, considering they drafted multiple quarterbacks in the first round during this stretch, and even had Jameis's famous 30-30 season in 2019, but the one route I don't want the Bucs to go is to try and run it back again in 2024 and go through the motions of another 7 or 8 win year, or hell, maybe an even 9 win year, and not get close to winning a 3rd Super Bowl title. There's a phrase that teams take on the personality of their head coach, and in the last 2 years Bruce Arians was in Tampa. They went 24-9 in the regular season and won a Super Bowl, and if they complete that comeback against the Rams in 2021, maybe they go back-to-back. But with Todd Bowles in a season and a half, they're 11-12 in the regular season with a 3-score loss in the postseason. And in Bruce's final year in 2021, Tampa was 2nd in points per game offensively, and in 2022 and 2023, they have ranked 25th and 26th in points per game. They have 0 run game, and they can't move the football consistently, which worries me because they play a game of football like they're hanging on for dear life. Personally, I think it's time to swing at a quarterback in the first round of the draft and to bring in an offensive-minded head coach and go from there. Because this division is up for grabs for not just 1 or 2 years, but if you draft a quarterback and do things right, this division is up for grabs for the next several years. And you can't say that about many divisions across the league like you can about the NFC South. Tampa, hit the rebuild button this offseason and start to build for a better tomorrow. Get a quarterback of the future, get a running back of the future, keep investing in the trenches, and let the quarterback throw to those 2 talented receivers in Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, assuming you keep Evans for the future, that is. But no matter how you slice it and no matter which way the Bucs opt to go, they are in a very interesting situation. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, please like and subscribe, as only about 25% of people watching are subscribed, and it helps the channel in a big way. Until the next video, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.